Yes, hello and welcome to Moth News Live, your go-to show for everything happening in Ireland and beyond. We try and get the facts. We get to the heart of the matter. We read between the lines so that you don't have to. I'm your host Keith Walsh, and today the show is really packed with some very important stories. There's been a lot going on in Ireland this week, including the ongoing unrest in Ballymena, where protests continue. But we will get to that in a moment. First, let's get into today's news in brief. Look, we spoke before about the NDRC. If you're wondering what the NDRC is, the NDRC are the National Digital Research Centre. So this was like a startup accelerator in Ireland that was helping early stage tech ventures grow and succeed. That was the whole point. They'd find investment, they'd find these startups, mostly tech startups, give them a few pounds, a few euros, and get them going. Now this has been wound down, and it was providing funding, mentoring, resources to these startups. It's been wound down, so this has led to concerns about the startups that had received the support, what was going to happen to them, and also questions about the investment. So, like, this was like heavily funded by the government, basically the taxpayers, and we're just wondering, where's that money gone? What have we? So with an organization like this, most people aren't aware it's going on. So, I mean, I wasn't aware it was going on until I spoke to Al. Now I am, and I'm going, okay, there's a lot of money taken out of the coffers, out of our, the taxpayers' pocket, I suppose, money that could have been used elsewhere. But we don't really know. There's no transparency. We don't really know how that money was spent, what's happened to it, and what happens now, and what happens to these startups. Because we've had some really interesting startups doing quite well, and then suddenly they're being bought over by this American company. They're being ingested, eaten up by these big American, and they're taking the tech. And we're just wondering where that leaves the startups and the founders. So Al has some updates on that. That is being wound down, but we want to find out what's happening now and where's the money gone. That's it's really important because, as I said, most people won't know about this. So we will be talking to Al later about the latest developments in the NDRC debacle. I'm calling it a debacle. The care home scandal, it's ongoing. Recent coverage here on Moth News. We've brought you the stories. If you've missed any of the stories or any of the care home scandal stuff here in Moth News, you can watch back on our YouTube channel. There's 4 or 5 interviews with people with their personal testimony of what happened to their experience of care homes, specifically during COVID, where it seemed the government made a decision to, just let a portion of our society just die. That seems to be what I would read into it. So you can have a look back at those videos. So recent coverage here in Moth News on RT Primetime, and of course the work of Care Champions and Magella Beatty, who we've also interviewed. You can watch that on YouTube as well. All of this has shed light on the overcrowded, underfunded care homes and the systematic issues that have led to neglect. So this is the neglect of our elderly in this country. We will be elderly soon. And if your parents aren't or haven't had experience of care homes, maybe your grandparents have, but your parents at some stage might need a care home, and you want to make sure they're being looked after. We also want to make sure we're going to be looked after when we get there. But it's shocking. Just bear with me. Yesterday, we spoke with solicitor Caoimhe Haughy, who has been on the show before. She works with families impacted by this crisis and in this area. She's also working in the hip operation debacle. More on that again. We will be talking to Caoimhe again about that whole. I mean, there's so much. There's so much broken in Ireland at the moment. I would urge you to go outside, enjoy the sunshine, look at the trees, enjoy the grass growing, enjoy the flowers, because you could get sucked into this this place where you think, everything is doomed. It's not actually, but there's just so many systems, and the way our government is running the country, and we're going to speak about the north of the country as well, and the way that's been run, and how certain these are all class issues. Okay, certain classes, socioeconomic groups are suffering because of policies by governments. Okay, so I would urge you to go out and just enjoy the sunshine. Try not to get caught up in it. It can be difficult, but do your best. So we spoke to Caoimhe Haughy, who works with these families, she had just returned from Dáil Éireann, where Care Champions had organised a protest where she heard some powerful speakers.
Magella described what is going on in Ireland at the moment is that our government has essentially sold our social care to big private companies for profit, that they're running our nursing home care as a model for profit, not a model for care. And she described that our elderly people are like being warehoused in these private nursing homes, and very much putting this neglect, this constant evidence of severe neglect. And one story seems to be worse than the other. I mean, there was a lady there today, again, everybody fell silent as she told the story of her late mom. She had a picture of her mom in relatively good health, and on the other side she had a picture of her mom when she fell into an absolutely shocking state of health. And this poor lady ultimately died. But this lady Yvonne, her mom was in a nursing home in Dundalk, again a private nursing home. And what is really stark in light of what we're hearing about the recent scandal and HIQA's inability to, sanction, discipline, etc., is that this lady put together a folder of information by way of a complaint. Even though you can't make an individual complaint to HIQA, they won't deal with it. But she had put together really valuable evidence about what she had uncovered in relation to her mom. It was utterly shocking. And she followed up with HIQA when they were about to come in to do their inspection and complete their report. And they told her, which I couldn't believe, she said it today outside the Dáil. So when I asked HIQA, had you taken into consideration the information I provided you with? The answer was no. We didn't consider it in the course of doing our inspection, compiling our report, and essentially tick boxing this nursing home as compliant. Now, I do respect HIQA, I do, and I understand what their function is, but I've said it before, I'll say it again, they have no teeth. All they do is go in, do inspections, gather together information, write up reports, compliant, tick, substantially compliant, tick, non-compliant, tick, make recommendations, and that's it. The CEOs and the owners of these private nursing homes, they're faceless. We don't even know who they are. These are the people who need to be called to account. These people need to sit in front of the Oireachtas Committee, in my opinion, one after another, to give an account. How are you running your nursing home? Are you complying with legislation, health and safety legislation, not just for patients, residents, but also for your employees? And HIQA needs to be given more powers immediately, or some other body, regulatory body set up, that if there are breaches and people are reporting issues, and this is into the mandatory reporting, that there is sanction, there's disciplinary action. And what An Taoiseach said yesterday in the Dáil, which I thought was very interesting, fines, penalties and fines. And if we don't do that, we're still going to be back. We've had Lee's Cross, we've had the desperate level of nursing home deaths in such a short period in 2020 during COVID, March, April and May, and we all know about that tragedy. And here we are now, 5 years post the start of COVID, and we've this latest scandal with nursing homes. It's all down to neglect. I think we have nearly 600 nursing homes in the country, but significantly, and this is what Magella Beattie spoke about today, is that 81% of our nursing homes are in private ownership. So that means there's even less lack of oversight, accountability, transparency with these private nursing homes. And one thing which frustrates me no end in the work that I do is nursing homes are playing a game. Private nursing homes are playing a game with families who want to get access to their loved one's medical records if their loved one has passed on, is deceased. They're refusing to give them, and they are quoting that they're exempt from providing access to medical records because the FOI does not apply to a private body, freedom of information, and number two, GDPR only applies to living persons.
There we have it. So you can watch that full interview on here on MOTH. I'm going to put it up over the weekend, so keep an eye out for that. Very, very interesting interview with Caoimhe, who's a solicitor, so she knows her stuff. She's been working with these families for a long time, and I mean, it's shocking, the stories. If you go back and look at the videos, the interviews on our YouTube, you'll see for yourself just like the neglect. People being given, sedatives like first thing in the morning where they'd never been on sedative before, just because they went into a care home. Just people. There was one woman, she told me the story of her mother, and her mother apparently had received medication 12 hours after she died. And I was shocked. I was saying, why would they give her, medication 12 hours after she died? Well, basically they'd mixed her up with somebody else, so they didn't even know who their mother was. They weren't even sure that she was the person in the box that they buried, because it was COVID and they weren't allowed to see her. It's astounding. And these are not isolated, the government and the HSC want you to think that these are isolated cases, When you put them all together, these are not isolated cases. These are affecting everybody in the country. Right, let's go to Ballymena. Let's have a look at this.
I utterly condemn the violence that we've seen overnight in Ballymena and in other parts of Northern Ireland, including against PSNI officers.
Yeah, look, unless you've been living under a rock, you'll have seen a lot of that footage, so there's no need to play all of that. And there's plenty of stuff out there. I saw on TikTok an interview with a young Filipino man who had come home from work and his house had been burnt out, and the car that he was working on, it wasn't even his car, it was his friend's car. He was a mechanic and he was fixing it, and he just came home to his family, his kids, his wife, and his house, and it had been burnt out. Just absolutely heartbreaking, shocking. Violent protests have escalated over the last few days. Petrol bombs, bricks were thrown, hatchets, everything at police. Tensions spread to nearby towns like Coleraine and Larne. So we're going to speak to Mael, a Belfast-based musician and activist who has been vocal about the political and social issues surrounding the violence. Before we go to Mael, let's have a look at this TikTok video that I saw Mael put up the other day.
I may have rattled a few cages. I said what I said. However, just to clarify a few things for anyone who's confused. Point one, being a Protestant is not the same thing as being a loyalist. Be a Protestant all you want. Knock yourself out. It's great. In fact, some of my best friends are Protestants. Two, there are many fine people who live in these communities, and they too ultimately are victims of the same toxic ideology. Drive down Shankill, one of the most deprived areas in the UK, you see a big fuck off mural of a literal queen, and on the other wall a big fuck off mural of a literal king. So what's the message there? The message is, don't worry, because we have a glorious monarchy. I'm old enough to remember Dale Pankhurst of the DUP telling his working class constituents not to join trade unions because they're a bit cagey. Point three, there's going to be, what about the fucking IRA blowing people up? Yes, that happened. And guess what? That was bad. But I'm talking about ideology here. Republicanism in the modern period, as espoused by...
We don't need to watch much more of that because we have Mr. Mael Vogue with us. Am I pronouncing your name correctly, Mael?
Pretty much, yes. It was Mael Vogue.
Mael Vogue.
Yeah, so Mael was in Gael, they're in with Gael, but sure, we'll let you.
I wasn't sure. I was going to say Whale, and I was thinking, oh, I could be wrong. So I second guessed myself, and I went with Mal. So apologies there. Well,
No, I mean it's a pun on my real name. I'm sure I wouldn't worry too much about it.
You want to start wearing a bag over your head, you know?
Yeah, probably, yeah, because it's a small pond up here. So.
Certainly is. First of all, I love the jersey. Where can I get my hands on one of those? So listen, just give us a little bit of background into what happened and what led to the riots from what you know.
So there was obviously the case is that there was a young girl, a teenage girl who was sexually assaulted, and they've arrested 2 young lads as well. So and it then was came out that the 2 young fellas who were held in custody were possibly of Romanian origin, and they needed a Romanian interpreter. So one thing leads to another, and a load of guys go on Facebook and they basically say it's these Romas, these Romanians, these foreigners in general just are over here taking our women and taking our babies and this, that, and the third.
Yeah.
One thing leads to another. They go out and they start burning people's houses, and this is why you have to have Filipino people putting up a flag. You know, they're putting up a Union Jack, or in many cases a paramilitary flag, because that's what they could find in the local shop, and then a Philippines flag. Is it this? Because obviously, because they're not white, these people don't know the difference between a Romanian person or between a South Asian person or a Filipino person. They just want to burn and to hurt somebody, and that's why it's spiraled out of control. That's the long and the short of it. Basically, it's pretty much just racists. You're going to hear on legacy media channels,
mainstream media.
Yeah, that this is there's legitimate concerns, and it's just racism, pure and simple. That's all it is.
But obviously, when every young woman is murdered or sexually assaulted or attacked in this part in Ballymena, in the wider county, in this part of the north of the country, I presume these people are always out in force.
Yeah,
you know, dragging men, their uncles, their brothers, their friends, you know, from the area. They're dragging them out of their houses and burning their houses. That's just what they do, is it?
Oh, yeah, it's a regular occurrence, Keith. You can't move for the being street justice performed on these guys. No, you've hit the nail on the head there. You know, there's a frightening statistic. There's something like 42 women have been killed in the past 5 or 8 years, and it's all been local Indigenous white men who've done it, and there's been no uproar about it. Funnily enough, there's a fella I know on Blue Sky. He's been compiling information on the people who are running these groups on Facebook. And one of the admins on the Ballymena group, which was naming streets of houses to burn, one of the admins who goes by the name Enoch Powell, you know, and his account is just wall-to-wall racism. But his wife was, she had done a post before where there was going to be something in school. They were going to teach, you know, basic sex education, and part of that was classes on consent. And she was up in arms against this for reasons, you know. So she was saying that everyone needs to protest about this and what they're trying to teach our kids because it's woke nonsense or whatever. So the solution is there, because the problem is men in general, but the solution's there. And it's more about, there was a very telling moment. I saw one of the videos in cold rain where they were burning, they were putting in the windows and they were trying to burn a house. And a fella, he shouted, "Babies, they're raping our babies." And I thought that was a telling thing to say, they're raping our babies, you know, because presumably it's fine. They don't care about it. It's the proprietary thing of women and children being, it's the insular nature of this is ours, and you're a foreigner, you can't have that. Do you know what I mean? But I think that possibly gets, I mean, it is just racism, but if there's any sort of concern for women and children, it's probably due to that rather than any sort of noble, genuine concern for them. Yeah,
because we have the, I mean, let's say we don't care about Filipinos, or we don't care about Romanians, or, you know, anybody that's not, you know, third, fourth, fifth generation, you know, Ballymena. You know, I don't know how you'd maybe people would just have to carry around a little booklet or something to show their credentials, or maybe people who aren't from the area, maybe a little star or something, just to, so they're easily identifiable, something like that. I don't know, create some sort of system, I mean,
what's the worst that can happen? That history shows us that there's nothing nothing wrong with doing things like that. And this is the thing. I mean, I personally know. I mean, in Belfast there was they were going to have a bit of a riot on the same night, and they congregated in a loyalist area at the lower part of the Ravenhill Road. And it was the same fella I was talking about in Blue Sky. He lives nearby, and he went out and informed them that the place that they were outside was a church and not a mosque, and that seems to have dispersed them. Now, Romanians aren't Muslims, as far as I know, but this is the mentality you're dealing with. But there is a wee Muslim family that live there, and they're local people. They all have Belfast accents, and everyone knows them. And but this is the thing, you also have you had the Shukri brothers were very famous loyalist paramilitaries, and they were I think his nickname was Andre the Egyptian. But there's this sort of two-faced nature of, but you're all right, we know you. It's these other ones, so they don't even have the courage of their own convictions. So it's a case of, it's more just the insular nature of it's the siege mentality of loyalism. The state itself is founded on this siege mentality thing, because it has to be to maintain the flimsy majority that they had. So you had to let out this sectarian genie out of the bottle, and once that's out, you can't. It's very difficult to put that back in, and that then just becomes reactionary against. It was mostly all white people living there 100 years ago, but it's just this innate mistrust of any outsiders coming in to meddle in the state itself.
And I suppose they had it quite nice in that, like, the previous program had been to remove the Catholics from their housing estates or their streets or whatever, and that seemed to work quite successfully. And and now the government were forcing them to live beside people of different skin colors. So I mean, you can understand how the discomfort they might feel. And essentially it is a program, and it's uncomfortable. I'm not, I grew up when the troubles were happening, but I was safe down in the south, and we had long since neglected our Catholic brothers and sisters, and almost denied what was happening. So I felt quite safe. But this program where if you do, and I would urge everybody to go and do the Black Cab tour and get up there and learn about the history of it. But Catholics were burnt out of their homes and forced to move into abandoned homes so they all live together in a sort of ghetto, or whatever you want to call it. So this is not new, and this is a playbook that has been used before by settlers, basically.
Yes, it's been used. It goes right back to the foundation of the state, to partition itself. The first pogroms were in the early 1920s, immediately after partition. There's a very good book, which is now out of print, I think, but if anyone can get it, called The Orange State by Michael Farrell. And it goes into great detail, covering right up until, I think it was written in 1975, so it only goes so far. But there was pogroms then, and then I think there was further ones in the 30s. And it was any time that because obviously this was a time of mass, you touched on it earlier about it being a class thing. Well, you were talking about the nursing home thing, and the class thing is always, it's always been played up where anytime there was, Catholic and Protestant workers were coming together to strike or anything, the government got out the big orange drum and whipped up this sectarianism, to keep people, which is an old strategy, and it's used all over. The ruling class are always going to want people divided and fighting amongst themselves. But yeah, it has historic precedent. There was pogroms in the 20s and 30s, and then eventually in the late 1960s, which kicked off what we now know as the Troubles. But you would think that people would learn that nothing good comes of these things. But I don't think they even think that far ahead of it. I think they just want to do violence to somebody, and it's simmering under the surface. And the people that organise these things, there's a very good thread on Blue Sky at the minute by a woman called Claire Mullally, or is it Mullally? I never know how to pronounce that one. But she is compiling, about the paramilitary involvement in it, basically, which the state and the legacy media kind of refuse to touch on. There's investigative journalists that are doing good work on it, but you'll not see an official headline on BBC or whatever saying that it's paramilitaries involved in this. And for some reason, the PSNI seem very hesitant to prosecute when it's a clear case of paramilitary involvement in it. So make of that what you will. I mean, at the minute we've got there's the Loyalist Communities Council, who are essentially Loyalist paramilitaries, and they seem to always be meeting with high-ranking state officials for funding and for their voice. They have an input. They have a veto almost on a lot of policies that are brought up at Stormont. So it's maybe the two things are connected. I don't know. Maybe I'm making a leap of logic here, but
Oh, sure, look.
yeah.
Yeah, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? And also, like, I mean, we talk about class because nobody, like, we should talk about the neglect of communities on both sides. Be the Protestant, be the Catholic. I mean, it doesn't really matter at this stage because, I mean, yeah, you've got your loyalist politicians, but they're neglecting their people as much as anything. Otherwise, this wouldn't happen. If these people didn't think that the reason that they don't have jobs, the reason that they don't have houses, the reason that they don't have facilities in their town, the reason the teenagers don't have anywhere to go is because of foreigners, then that's the fault of their politicians, surely.
Absolutely, 100%. And this is why I make a point of saying that, as much as I'm calling out loyalism for being hateful and being reactionary, it's a different thing from saying that the people, these Protestant people living there, that they're all bad. There's people in those communities that are failed by their leaders, and they're victims ultimately of this of partition and of the sectarian state that was established, because they've been told for 100 years that everything's the fault of the Taigs, or it's the fault of the foreigners. And in the 60s, the young Catholic people were encouraged to educate themselves, but there's a real vein of anti-intellectualism running through these communities, and they're equally as deprived. But I do think that you find that there's people willing to educate themselves, maybe more so in Republican communities that are equally deprived. But yes, the deprivation is a thing that it must just be very upsetting for people that are working in communities and trying to get things done, because I touched on it in that video. You've a mural of the King and one of the Queen on the opposite side. And then you have all these murals about, how amazing it is they've died in the First World War for nothing, essentially. And it's telling people that it's just reinforcing that class system of there's a hierarchy, the Queen's at the top, and then there's people, you're here, and then all the foreigners, and that's what they did around the world with imperialism. The British people themselves were kept at the bottom and told that, well, at least you're better off than the people out in the colonies or whatever. So it's that same sort of mentality of imperialism turned inward, and that's what's ultimately failing these people, I think.
I mean, you talked about the difference between Protestants and loyalists. Like there is a concern, because what we're seeing, and the reason I want to talk to you, and the reason why I think we should be concerned as well, is because we're seeing protests in the likes of Cork and Dublin and Galway and some Midlands towns as well, and there's some familiar faces turning up, and the irony is that some of these faces are the people that we, as Catholic Ireland or whatever, if you want to have a religious bent to it, we should and were traditionally opposed on the opposite side of these people, because what we're seeing is fascists, loyalists, call them what you want, unionists, fascists. These are the people that are turning up and encouraging our communities in the same thing, protect our women and our children, and march against the government and march against immigration and all this kind of stuff. And it's a really strange thing that's happening, and there's concern. I would have concern that this could be something that we could, when we saw it on Parnell Street, the top around O'Connell Street last year. But I mean, this could happen again, and we need to be aware of what exactly is going on here. Yes, you might have concerns about housing. Yes, you might have concerns about your community. Yes, but this is being driven by and funded. Like, it's a very, very, it's a playbook. It's been used before. It'll be used again. We need to educate ourselves, and we need to know exactly what we're getting involved in. By all means, protest against the government. By all means, go to your local politicians and say, we do not have enough in this community. But be very aware of the othering of people and the pointing the finger, and it is being done by fascists, and in this case, loyalists who, traditionally are fascists.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems strange, yes, but a lot of these things become easy to understand when you realize that they just hate other people. There was a very good video on YouTube by a fellow called Sean, and he had said that, they always bang on about European history, but if you look at European history before what we now call, globalization and mass migration, it's just constant war for thousands and thousands of years. The war of what's that? The 30 Years War is this like one of the most violent things that's ever happened. But and he then goes on to say that, but these people would rather have constant conflict with each other between the likes of loyalists and Republicans than have to sit next to a black or brown person on the bus. Like, that's when you distill it into that. That's what makes the most sense to me. It's the same reason why people love to point out the contradictions of, you'll go to a loyalist bonfire and there'll be Israel flags, but sometimes you'll see a Nazi flag there or Combat 18. But they just love colonialism and oppressing people, and that's the
love that.
Yeah, it's two things are the same. They don't care about any supposed ideological. They just like to see these people that they don't like being oppressed. And I think what you touched on about about being vigilant against fascism in the South, I think traditionally it is a smaller problem than it would be in countries that are colonizers or countries that haven't been colonized like Ireland has. And that's a very flimsy, we're in a unique position in the world that we are like pretty much the only white people that know what being colonized is like, or one of the only white countries. But that can very easily be lost, and especially these fascist actors like to prey on the we fought against the Brits and now there's a new enemy, so we need to be very conscious of that. But luckily, there's a lot of people like yourself, you're not a minority. It's the majority of people, but it is perhaps deteriorating a wee bit the further you get from actual living under the colonial yoke, as I still do now. I know that it's not the same as it was for my father and mother, when internment was happening and all. But I've always been, from a very young age, conscious of the fact that the country I live in is ruled by a foreign power. And I think that people in Republican communities are encouraged to learn about international solidarity and learn about, you go to the International Wall on Davis Street at the bottom of the falls, and it's Frederick Douglass and it's Nelson Mandela and it's all those sort of people, and it encourages you to sort of learn about the struggles that other people all around the world have faced. So I think that maybe in the South that still exists to a very large extent, and it's great to see. But perhaps in those communities under the relative privilege that they have of not experiencing direct colonization anymore, and especially now you've got the internet and you've got people telling them what they want to hear. I mean, like a lot of things, all of this could be solved by if we had legacy media who were responsible and weren't in a for-profit industry where they want to generate clicks. Because if they were to just write accurate headlines that say, by the way, this isn't true, you shouldn't listen to this man. But instead, they try to give the illusion of balance, so they give equal credence to everything, which is why people then think that there's a debate to be had when some things really aren't up for debate at all. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And that's why we're here. That's why MOTH exists.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because the mainstream media don't give you what you need to know, and they'll tell you what's best for them and whoever owns the newspaper, etc., etc. Tell people where they can, because I've recently discovered your music as well. Tell people where they can find your videos. You're on YouTube, I know for sure.
Yeah, I'm on YouTube. I'm also on Spotify, iTunes, Tidal, all of the streaming services. You can even get me on SoundCloud still. I'm on Instagram as Mael Vogue as well. I'm also on Blue Sky. I think I've been trying to use it the most, but I'm not on it. I'm not very active on it. I'm on TikTok as well. I've got I should hopefully be playing a festival, United Tribes, at the end of June here. And then I've got an album coming out soon, and I've got another anti-colonial standalone single, which will be for charity, coming out very soon, hopefully before the album as well. The album should be out in July.
Great. Mael Vogue. We might talk to you then before you release then, or before your album comes out.
Okay, perfect, Keith. Thanks for having me. All right.
Toga Bugga. There we have it. Yeah, I mean, let's bring in Al there. He's waiting in the wings because Al, I know you're listening there. How are you?
Hey man, you all right?
Yeah, good. I mean, I'm sure you've been following the what's been happening in the north of Ireland. The northern part of the country, Northern Ireland, the north of Ireland, whatever you prefer to call it. It's really shocking, isn't it? I mean, it's very hard to get across to I mean, the big losers here are women and young women and children, because what we've ended up in the situation here is men who have come out to protest against an assault, and that assault has been lost. This young girl and what happened to her has been lost, and then ultimately and subsequently the local girls and women of Ballymena have ended up in this situation where they're frightened in their homes because their next door neighbours are being burnt out, and they have to put up flags or signs saying we're locals, and it just seems to have totally backfired against whatever the intention was in the first place.
Yeah, it's kind of it's becoming a global thing now, isn't it? It's kind of like we have to start with the tagline "No women, no children," and just remove them from the accidental collateral damage, right? And it just seems to be, excuse me, it seems to be happening in quite a few locations, right? Like, if you look at, LA descending into, let's say bursts of chaos, right? Is what they're calling it. But to me, it's just chaos. But it seems to be organized chaos, doesn't it? Like, it's kind of like plant a few people in the middle of this thing, it kicks off. But I think the more underlining concern for me is as a father, husband, sister, brother, son, whatever, is that it doesn't take a huge amount at the minute for things to escalate really quickly. It kind of just demonstrates that we're on a bit of it feels like we're on a bit of a knife edge, in general, economically, politically, religious, sectarial, like it's kind of just
everything.
Yeah,
and we've spoken about it before. It seems to be like it totally is. Like, if we look at the care home stuff, it really is like an under. We've got a government, and probably, I mean, certainly, whatever they're trying to do, the funding that's been pulled from Northern Ireland, as it's known, as as part of the British Isles, the funding that's been pulled. There's no money being spent on the youth. Like, one of the things that happened was they moved families into a community centre, which was brilliant for the area. I think it was in Larne or Ballymena. They moved them into this, and that was burnt out. So that was like, a brilliant community centre for the community, which now isn't there because of this. But also, funding isn't going into that part of the world, into those counties. And also down here, we're seeing a government who are sort of just like standing back, and there's platitudes, and they're saying, oh, this is terrible and that's terrible, and oh God, isn't that, this shouldn't be happening. But they're not spending, they're not investing, they're doing a really bad job. And we have to really look at the government and how they're creating this vacuum to allow all of this to happen.
Yeah, look, it's definitely diplomacy is failing, isn't it? Like, and that's coming. You can feel the frustration from that conversation, And look, I was up in Belfast quite a number of times over the last couple of weeks. I attended one or two of the Unify Ireland events, and also in Westminster, and you could see like the sheer. It's even gone beyond frustration. Just people just feel they just don't have a voice anymore. They feel they're not being listened to. I mean, I heard one person comment in a very public arena. There was a number of MPs there. There was TDs present. They just said, look, the mainstream media has just failed miserably in terms of their inability to communicate objectively. And I've seen a number of people commenting this in the States. I think they're a bit more open than other locations. They've just said the journalists have lost their balls, right? Like, they've just lost their grit for reporting on the news. They seem to just want to report what's popular with the powers that be. They're not challenging anybody. They're not, going against the grain. They're not going to step up and say this is wrong. Like, I remember like my youth years, right? And look, Keith, you can speak to this. You've gone that track where like you kind of saw journalists as prestigious, right? Like, fucking hell, like a journalist is like, the movies, right? Just like the Superman Clark Kent, do anything for a story, and they were, or the Watergate, or
Watergate scandal.
what was that? The Pelican, was it the Pelican Brief? Is it the one with Denzel Washington? It's like, fuck it, like that's what we grew up watching, right? Or now it's like they just like they're editorials, is my opinion, right? And we'll dovetail on to another topic, which is, I shared an article to you just there earlier, right? A well-known figure in Ireland, who I know, right? DC, so I can speak to him, right? And I can say he needs a good kick up the ass, right? Like he's publishing something in relation to concern, which we've been saying here for how long, right? And you and I have had the offline conversations about it. We were like, Al, is this really happening? I said, now here you've got a guy gone through the stages. He has done businesses himself. He's been heavily involved, right? He's quoted a guy in the article, Damien Mullally, who's got a serious issue coming.
Damien Mully.
Mully, sorry. Well, it's Mullally, I think his name is, but
Damien Mully,
right?
Damien Mully, he's had several pops at me down through the years.
Yeah, so. And I'm coming for him individually, right? So I'll just speak to. Here's two, heroes that have, been involved in setting up a hashtag #LeeWork, which was a poke at us for WeWork, and have, we've got access to it, right? Where they've been commenting on defamation about the company, calling us grifters, highlighting the failure, blowing the startup off the map publicly, where it's been commented to me in closed areas, because as you know, I've launched a very successful company again, right? And I've been in rooms where they said, geez, you wouldn't want to fail in Ireland. Like, wow, you guys really look after your own, the Irish begrudgery, absolutely torpedo. The stuff that guy said, like, I'm not going to get into now because there's a legal case coming his way fast and furious, right? Because I do have proof now in terms of some of the stuff he said. And, they're here now wondering, why is the sentiment changing about Ireland? And they think that a company that went to unicorn, getting taken down, that leads to a very negative impact on the ecosystem, hasn't had an impact. I mean, what fucking planet are these guys on? Like, wake up, right?
So they're not really joining them. Like their dots are gone askew, really, if they're trying to join them.
But they're trying to blame Trump and tariffs. Are they fucking dreaming? The reality is NDRC gone, HPAN gone, no angel investors. There's one show in town which I've spoke to loads of times, Alan Merriman, Elkstone. Like, I've been very vocal about those guys. They're the opposite of founder friendly and starter friendly, right? You've got Enterprise Ireland asleep at the wheel, right? That's the reality. Like, they're not waking up to it. There's some very good people internally there, but like, they lost a very sophisticated, educated CEO who was a really good guy. And I say that openly, right? And now they've replaced it with somebody who's just come up through the ranks. I'm not going to say anything derogatory, but I got my own opinion of the resident CEO that's there now, right? I've had first-hand experience of her, right? And zero support for any startups. Don't get in trouble is the word. And now you've got DC who's coming out talking about the issues that are at hand for the ecosystem, when we've been banging that drum for how long? And here's where it gets real. This is the wake-up call for Ireland, right? You are getting a reputation as being corrupt, and that you don't support startups, and you encourage corporate raid, and you guys use insolvency practices to fucking do it. And you've got characters like Jeffrey Leo knocking around the place. You've got Adam Merriman, Elkstone knocking around the place, and that's the reality. So wake up, Ireland. You now have a reputation as being, you move the startups between each other, tech goes out the other door, the investors externally lose out, or they just come in and take the tech. That's it.
So this guy DC is saying at one point, now Ireland must mount an equally ambitious whole-of-government approach to entrepreneurship, creating indigenous companies capable of achieving global scale and capturing economic value within Ireland.
Yeah, bullshit.
I mean,
seriously.
He has got a point, but the point is that there's really clear and obvious reasons why this isn't happening, and it's not some like he's not just like he's just invented the wheel here. Like he's going, we need to do. You're like, well, yeah, well, look what's happening. Look what's actually been happening to startups, to founders, to people who are trying to do what you're saying. This is like it's been really, really tough, and it's been absolute. It's almost. I mean, you've. I don't know if you don't. Actually, I don't know if you want me to tell you, or tell people you don't live in the country anymore because of it. But like, it's an impossible place, and there's reasons behind that. So to be coming out and going, we should have, have this like really healthy place for startups and entrepreneurs.
You couldn't pay me enough to ever scale a business from Ireland ever again.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
After the way these guys behave. 100%.
So on one hand, you've got the people who pilloried you and similar and other founders, pot shots. You were the bad guys. You were like whatever. You were there to be taken down. They did that, and now they're saying, "Oh, you know what? We should have a really healthy environment for founders." Well, we do. Yes, we should have, but you're part of the problem.
Oh yeah. Nothing about the begrudgery, the envy. Take the company down. You fail, you get blown off the map. You don't get encouraged to start again. You don't get any support. Not only do you lose your company, then you're pursued, and then you're targeted personally, and then you've got these guys that are trolling you online because they're sitting, keyboard warriors, and never had the balls to fucking do it in the first place, and never had the balls to go out and fundraise, and none of them have ever actually achieved fucking anything worthwhile talking about. I've never raised capital to that extent, and not look under the hood and say, "Hey, is there something going on here? My tech is in another company now that's massively successful." I mean, wake up, guys. I mean, it's just. I mean, most of the talent has got the heck out of there anyway. That's it.
Yeah.
Even Roy Keane said it, who got blown off the map because of the Saipan debacle, right? And he was like, here in Ireland has to get out of Ireland to be successful and come back again. Like, and how long ago did he say that?
20 years since Saipan.
And even yourself, Keith. I mean, look at the experience that you've had, and look, we've like serendipity. We have a common guy that we're speaking to today, who's a known online troll, and like he's encouraged, right? Yeah. I think the guy put in like something like high double digit freedom of information requests about Altada in a 2 or 3 month period. I think he put in like 100 requests or something ridiculous. Right. Yeah. Like, I mean, get on with your life, man. Build, craft your own patch,
I didn't know who this guy was, but he kept coming for me and coming for me. And eventually I confronted him. I said, well, like, privately messaged him, and he completely backed down, and apologized. But
I never met the guy. I don't even know him. I never met him.
The only reason I contacted him was like, sorry, who are you? Why do you not like me?
I even questioned, was it an actual person at one stage? I thought it was just like, what? I was like, are you real?
This is the problem is that he's a real guy. That's the problem. Scary.
It's worse. That's even worse.
Like, what's your job? What are you supposed to be doing? It's like you're wasting all the time on me.
Get a life,
But he's part of the problem, and now these guys are coming out going, hey, we know what to do. Well, just stop doing what you have been doing, and that would go a long way to allowing, as you call them, unicorns, these like founders, companies that we are doing great things, but we're being prevented by the system that am I saying they're being prevented by the system that exists in Ireland, and you are part of the problem. You writing, what did you say at the start? This is one of the longest articles I've ever written. It's like, oh, okay, good man. I'll count the words later, and I'll compare them to all the other articles that you wrote that I read.
Exactly. No, exactly, Dujan. Look at all the commentary. I mean, I could put up messages, direct messages, all that like stuff that has been shared to me. These guys, I'll call them out eventually. I'm too busy building something wonderful again and doing this, which is we're starting to, at least we're proactive. We're not just sitting there talking, we're doing, right? And I am helping startups every day, right? I'm mentoring companies. I'm helping them get funding. I'm proactively trying to support them. Even after what happened to us, we've worked with how many startups, which you know that have gone into troubles, and we've helped them in the background and mentored them. I'll continue helping people. These guys aren't going to stop me, right? And the reality is, what are they actually doing?
What are you doing? You need to write a really long article, Al.
Yeah, I'll write a very long letter and I'll send it to everybody.
Writing the longest article I've ever written. That would be.
I don't have time to write articles. Actually, I'm too busy trying to build the business. But I'll use an agentic employee that will probably create something a lot more sophisticated than these guys can put together. And at least Damien can use an LLM to do a summary of the article. Well done, buddy. Woohoo!
So this, if we don't dovetail into this, the National Digital Research Centre, is that the NDRC? Have I got that right?
Yeah.
So they
which DC was involved in indirectly, by the way. He was a mentor on that program.
Oh, interesting. So this has been wound down. Is it finished? Has it been wound down? Is it like have they still to give it the final club over the head, or what's happening?
Wound down, wound up. I think it's made more comebacks than the late George Foreman. I'm not sure. Like, you know, what is actually going on there.
At least he invented the grill. You know what I mean? These guys have done nothing.
I mean, at least he pivoted.
He left us with something. Yeah. What if the NDRC left us with?
I mean, carnage.
Like, right? we should take this seriously, and anybody watching this, like, this is taxpayers' money that's going in to fund startups and tech, and some brilliant startups, some brilliant tech, and some great and like brand new companies, and then you're going, okay, well, so what's happened now? So you're winding down the NDRC. What happened? Where's the transparency? Do we know what happened? What's happening to the people that have been mentored? What's happened to those founders, those companies? Where's that money gone? All these questions that won't really be asked, I think, because maybe people like me and, you know, your general Joe blogs won't even know that this exists, or won't even know that a lot of the taxpayers' money has been invested and gambled. It is a form of gambling, and we don't know where it's gone now.
And Keith, it's very simple. Come on and defend the position. Defend the statistics. How many companies got funding? How many got to a successful outcome? How many founders were looked after the exit? Where's that money gone? Where's the tech gone? Where's the return on investment? The match funding? You know, you went through the performance of Elkstone Fund 1 last time. You know, it's demonstrably underperforming. Then they've gone for a second one. They're advertising every second week. Give us your money, we look after you, right? You know, there's one or two companies that they're associated with. Again, I saw a very nice, sophisticated post from the guy from Dimpley, you know, wonderful exit. He's actually a very nice guy. You know, I don't have the pleasure of knowing you intricately, but, you know, I've seen he's, you know, built a nice business. He's trying to do the best he could. He's exited. Who knows what the circumstances are, but that's just another one, right? What is the outcome though? You know, how many times have we seen undisclosed exit? Fantastic story. Yeah, let's all celebrate. But what the reality is, why don't we just start getting into more transparent conversation with these guys and say, here's a company X, it made Y, the company was bought for Z, and it was bought for this amount of money, and here's the money that's going back into the ecosystem. That's it. It's not complicated. Like,
because I presume, Al, that there's a non-disclosure side of this, that if you are taken over and there is a takeover, you do sell, like, you are a founder whose company has been, I don't know, ingested by another company or whatever, you're bound maybe to come out with something, a positive letter or a positive, like, you know, exit sort of message maybe, or is that just me?
If you take the deal. So remember now, we have, you know, we did not take the deal. We were in a closed meeting. We were told, don't say anything, take the deal, do the deal with the devil. That's quote Adam Merriman Elkstone, take the deal with the devil. No. So
bad things happened. If you take the deal with the devil, you write something nice. This has been great. You're not going to say anything bad because or otherwise the deal is off. And you feel like you might have felt at one point, I mean, you took a big chance, but you might have felt at one point, well, this is the only, you know, show in town. This is our only option.
I'm never going to take it, you know. That's it. Like, end of story. Right? That's it. Pain is nice. You should be uncomfortable. The right path is uncomfortable, right? Get out of your comfort zone. Take it. You know, why would you want to just like be somebody that fucking falls over and sells out, right? I mean, come on.
So, you know? So what we're saying is NDRC, any of these guys are involved. We need to know. We need to know what happened to the, you know, give us a list. Company outcome, investment, blah, blah, blah. We want all the details. And then it's fine. Like, as you said, come on here and come on to MOTH and come on here and defend yourself. And me and Al have a nice little chat with you.
Sometimes it takes somebody very brave. I quote Keith Woods. I don't know if you remember Keith Woods. I totally got in such high regard.
The flying potato. Yeah. course I remember.
The rugby guy, you know, the hooker, wasn't he? And he came out. I remember it was during the Six Nations or Five Nations at the time, I think. And he came out and he was on an interview, and it was one of those situations where we nearly got there, right? And he was being interviewed, and they were like, "Oh, Keith, well done, great performance." He said he just stopped him. This is not verbatim. I'm paraphrasing, right? He was like, "When are we going to stop, like, settling for second best? We had the best team on the pitch. We should have won it. I'm sick of this mentality in Ireland of we nearly got there. We want to start win." And I just, you know what, I'd actually put that down to like being a catalyst in the history of the rugby mentality, where we went on like to create winners because somebody had the courage to call it out and say, stop settling for fucking losing. Why are Irish guys happy with failure? Right? And I'm not saying that be afraid of failure. It is part of the journey.
Yeah.
And I failed demonstratively and publicly, right? And I use it as a stepping stone to success. That's the reality. And I'm going to keep looking at it that way. And I'm not afraid of it, right? And that's what he was saying. Be there to win. If you lose, at least you've tried your best to win. And that's it. And like at times, that like I would have more respect for DC and he came up and called it and said, we're failing. Not fluffy, big, long passages of nonsense. It's like the Irish ecosystem for startups is failing. Call it.
Yeah.
Which is having an economic impact on the country and the government, and all of the facets that we're speaking to here in the show on a weekly basis are failing. We're failing our citizens.
Yeah.
That's it.
If you put all these things together, you'll put young people coming out of university. That's the big lie, isn't it? You go to university and then you're going to get the job and then you're going to be encouraged and you're going to be supported. You've got all these people coming out. They're not being encouraged. They're not being supported. They can't buy a house. You have to have 2 jobs. You have to commute. You have to leave your house at 6 o'clock. You don't see your kids. And then you've got these people in the care homes whose parents aren't being looked after. And then you've got the lower socioeconomic people who just don't have the facilities. You know, they're seeing maybe, people moving into their estate and they're perceived that these people are getting more than them, or they're being looked after more than them. All of this, you add all of this up, Ireland, as we've said it before, is broken. And the government need to.
But if you go up the ladder into the top 5%, which is what we're just hearing here in terms of the social divide or the economic divide, the reality is the very people that are causing this are shipping their kids out to other places outside Ireland for education, for jobs, for roles, and for even getting.
They're not investing the money back in the country. They're not interested. Yeah, they're taking the money out. Very briefly, then, I presume with the Jeff Leo thing, we talked about he signed his company over to Juanita in Spain. Fair play to him. I think he gave it to her for a steal. She did very well out of it.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. I presume that the iPass, it's not an iPass center anymore. I presume that was all shut down. I presume they didn't go ahead with it.
Word on the street is, which is scary that they did it anyway. No, I'm not sure. I've heard mixed signals, but I do know that he was very frustrated and angry that I had, as a concerned citizen, offered support and supported, put my money where my mouth is, and supported the charity or organization that was launching something, right? I know there's frustration outside, and I know also that their locals are beside themselves in terms of this. This seems to be just kind of spiraling into. He just seems to be able to do whatever the heck he wants. Right?
Because this is a big story that came out, and sure, you're going with this information coming out about Dundrum House, and make no mistake about it, the state of Dundrum, the little village, and how the locals are experiencing living in this town since Jeff Leo came in and took over the Dundrum House. And this is nothing to do with the people who have been using the iPass Centre. This is purely about how he's been running his business in that town and doing his business in this town. He's bad juju for the town, and they came out in court that the iPass was going to be taken from him, so he signed the thing over to Juanita in Spain and did this this sleight of hand, ace up his sleeves, slip somebody Mickey Finn. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. And suddenly it's like Juanita Inc. is running the iPass Centre Dundrum, and it's just gone ahead.
And the other paradox here, Keith, is it's not his business either, right? Which is being documented in court. So not only is it like questionable in terms of how he's conducting his own business, isn't actually his own business. So he's essentially, has been a trusted advisor to a family portfolio and was entrusted with their money. It's not his money. And he's essentially now in court, answering to his behavior as their trusted advisor, corporate advisor, director, whatever his classification is in this instance, right? And he's been misbehaving while misbehaving. Does that make sense? So it's like, it's not his money, it's not his property. He's misbehaving with the property, with the money, and then he's got a corrupt team around him supporting. That's it. And that's coming out. That's not just my view of the word now. That's correct.
These are facts.
It's been stated. They're corrupt. That's it.
Yeah, and this will all come out in the Netflix series anyway, won't it?
Yeah, just one or two people reached out. I think he's made. Look, I'm going to reserve my position on this because I know there's a very aggressive legal case imminent, right? But I do know he's really pissed off some very powerful people, right? Who have reached out to me as well, that are very connected in very high profile roles, and they're like, right, I'm going to do this on my ticket, so you let me know when you want to go gangbusters with this and go public. We're got your back. So he's pissed off too many people and the wrong people,
He's not as clever as he thinks he is. Al, thanks as always. And look, we're bringing you. It seems like doom and gloom, but the sun is shining, the grass is growing. There's some beautiful countryside out there. Go out and enjoy it, and try not to think that it's as bad as it may appear, because the point of all of this is just to bring awareness and to say, look, this is actually what's happening. Don't be fooled by what you're being told is happening. Don't be fooled by the mainstream media and how they're presenting it. This is actually what's happening. And as you said, the top 5% taking the money out, laughing all the way to the bank, and not reinvesting in the country, and do not care about you, the government, the top 5%. End of. That's it. So our dick of the week then would be Ireland Inc., or we just call them the top 5%.
I'm gonna give to, you know what, just the fact, just for the shits and giggles, let's give it to Damien Mully, whatever his
Tell you what, I never thought I'd
name is.
mention that guy's name.
Let's give it to him in DC. Joint dick of the weeks. Yeah, they've got the right terminology anyway. DC.
Damien Mully, where have you been?
DD. The two dicks.
Dick and dick.
A bag of dicks to them, Keith.
Double dick.
DC should know better, man. He ran an incubator. I thought he was fucking trying to help startups. He went away to fuck up. Whatever happened to him, maybe he's just a bit bitter.
Maybe.
But as you said, there is positively, because at least there's guys like us have highlighted it, and regardless of the messenger, even though it's coming from a different source, people are starting to wake up, even if they're putting their own spin on it. So hopefully we're starting to kind of break in. Beyond that cloud. And as you said, the only way to move forward sometimes just get it out, rip off the band-aid and move on,
That's it. And no shame. Let's get rid of the shame. Let's just be
as my late pop said, Kate, a problem shared is a problem. It's a problem fucking halved.
I think we all need
except in Ireland. You share your problem to fucking tell everybody. And then they begrudge you for telling them.
The problem shares is another reason to feel shame.
They charge you for telling them.
We need to be more Keith Wood and more Roy Keane, and don't be afraid to walk away when things aren't good enough.
Yeah, fucking great guys, man. Great guys. Brilliant.
Al, have a great weekend. Thank you very much. And
you, my man.
You out there, thank you very much for watching as always. Do tell your friends and watch. You can look back at all our interviews, and I will be putting up that interview with that solicitor Caoimhe Haughy about the care homes later this weekend. So follow us on YouTube and follow our wherever you're watching this. It could be on X, it could be on Instagram, it could be on. There's too many to mention. So we appreciate your support, and we'll be seeing you again. Take care. If you have a story that you want to share as well, do get in touch. Take care and good evening. See ya. Bye.
Thanks, Keith. See you, man.